The dust-laden wind carried the sound of approaching hooves as Mabel Foster clutched the tattered wedding dress to her chest, watching anxiously from the window of the stagecoach station. It was 1875 in Granite, Colorado, and her wedding day had arrived, but so had the devastating news that her intended groom had fled with another woman, leaving nothing but a hastily scrawled note and a mountain of debts that her late father would never be able to repay. Xavier Kane noticed the young woman standing alone at the station, her copper hair catching the late afternoon sunlight as tears streaked down her freckled cheeks. He'd ridden into town intending only to deliver a herd of cattle to the railroad, not to have his heart stopped by the sight of a beautiful woman in distress. Yet something about her vulnerability mixed with the determined set of her jaw made him rein in his horse and dismount. "Pardon me, miss," Xavier said, removing his dust-covered Stetson and approaching with cautious steps. "Might be overstepping, but you look like you could use some assistance." Mabel quickly wiped her tears, embarrassed to be caught in such a state. "I'm quite all right, thank you," she replied, though her trembling voice betrayed her. Xavier's weathered face showed genuine concern. At 28, he'd seen enough of life to recognize true desperation. "Name's Xavier Kane. Most folks call me Zav." "I don't mean to pry, but a lady shouldn't be crying alone at a stagecoach station." Something in his gentle tone broke through Mabel's resolve. "My fiancé, he's gone, left me with nothing but debts in this." She gestured to the wedding dress. "I was meant to be married today." "That's mighty low of any man," Xavier said, his jaw tightening. "Where are you headed now?" "Nowhere," Mabel admitted, the word hanging heavy between them. "I have no family, no money for passage. The bank is foreclosing on my father's property tomorrow. I was counting on the marriage too." She trailed off, too proud to admit she'd been desperate enough to marry a man she barely knew for financial security. "You're the Foster girl, aren't you? Old Doc Foster's daughter?" Xavier asked, recalling the respected physician who'd passed away some months prior. Mabel nodded, surprised. "You knew my father. He saved my brother's life once. Good man." Xavier gazed thoughtfully at the mountains in the distance. After a long moment, he spoke again. "Miss Foster, I own a small ranch about 15 miles outside of town. It ain't much, but it's growing. I've been looking for someone to cook, tend the house. Would be a proper job with pay and a roof over your head until you figure things out." Mabel studied him suspiciously. "Why would you offer such kindness to a stranger?" "Maybe I'm repaying a debt to your father," Xavier said simply. "Or maybe I know what it's like to be alone with nowhere to turn." The sincerity in his eyes made Mabel's heart flutter unexpectedly. I don't know if I should," she hesitated, though she had precious few alternatives. "I understand your caution," Xavier replied. "Tell you what, you can speak to Sheriff Donnelly about me. He'll vouch for my character. I'll be loading supplies at the general store for the next hour if you decide to accept." With that, he tipped his hat and left Mabel to her thoughts. She watched his tall figure walk away, noticing the confident set of his shoulders and the respectful nods he gave to townsfolk along the dusty street. An hour later, after a brief conversation with the town's sheriff and several shopkeepers who spoke highly of honest Xav Kane, Mabel found herself riding alongside the cowboy in his wagon, heading toward an uncertain future but one infinitely more promising than what awaited her in town. The Kane Ranch came into view as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. It was modest but well kept, a sturdy log cabin with smoke curling from the chimney, a barn, corral, and pastureland stretching toward the foothills. "It's not much compared to what you might be accustomed to," Xavier said apologetically as he helped Mabel down from the wagon. "It's beautiful," she replied honestly. After months of watching her family home deteriorate while caring for her ailing father, the simplicity of Xavier's ranch felt like a fresh start. The next few weeks established a rhythm between them. Mabel proved herself capable and hardworking, transforming the bachelor's Spartan cabin into a proper home. Xavier taught her about ranch life, patient with her mistakes and generous with his praise. They took their meals together, conversations growing longer and more comfortable with each passing day. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in hues of amber and gold, Xavier broke their companionable silence. "My ma always said the right woman makes a house into a home," he said quietly. "Never understood what she meant until now." Mabel felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm just doing what you're paying me for." "Nah," Xavier disagreed gently. "It's more than that. You've brought life back to this place." "To me, if I'm being honest." Their eyes met, and Mabel felt something shift between them, a recognition of feelings that had been steadily growing beneath the surface of their daily interactions. The moment was interrupted by the distant rumble of approaching riders. Xavier stood, instantly alert, hand moving instinctively to the revolver at his hip. "Stay here," he instructed, his voice tight with sudden tension. 3 riders approached, silhouetted against the darkening sky. Mabel recognized one immediately: Roger Williams, her former fiancé, flanked by 2 rough-looking men she didn't know. "Evening, Kane," Williams called, his voice carrying an undercurrent of malice. "Heard you'd taken something that belongs to me." Xavier's posture remained relaxed, but Mabel could see the dangerous glint in his eyes. "Nothing here belongs to you, Williams. State your business and move on." Williams dismounted, swaggering forward. He was handsome in a polished way that now seemed artificial compared to Xavier's natural grace. "Mabel, darling," he called, ignoring Xavier, "there's been a misunderstanding. I've come to take you back." Mabel stepped forward despite Xavier's warning glance. "You abandoned me at the altar and stole my father's savings," she stated coldly. "There's no misunderstanding." "Water under the bridge," Williams said dismissively. "I've had some luck at cards. The wedding's back on." Xavier moved subtly, positioning himself between Mabel and her former fiancé. "The lady's made her choice. She's not leaving with you." Williams's face darkened. "She has no dowry, no family, nothing to offer. What could you possibly want with her?" "She's the only treasure I need," Xavier responded, his voice steady and sure. "Some men value different things than money, Williams." The confrontation escalated when one of Williams's companions reached for his gun. Xavier moved with surprising speed for a man his size, drawing and cocking his revolver before the other man cleared leather. "You're outnumbered, Kane," Williams warned, though he seemed less confident now. "Maybe," Xavier conceded, "but the first man to draw on me won't live to see who wins. Is that a chance you're willing to take?" The standoff stretched into tense seconds until Williams finally raised his hands in mock surrender. "Keep her then, but this isn't over." With a final venomous glance at Mabel, he and his companions departed, dust swirling in their wake. When they were alone again, Xavier turned to Mabel, concern etched on his features. "Are you all right?" Mabel nodded, though she was shaking. "Did you mean what you said to him, about me being?" "Treasure?" Xavier's weathered face softened. "Every word. Mabel, I know it's too soon and I've got no right to ask, but I'm starting to think that you arriving here wasn't just chance." "I've been thinking the same," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. That night marked a turning point in their relationship. Though Xavier maintained proper boundaries, with Mabel continuing to sleep in the small room he'd prepared for her, their conversations grew deeper, their stolen glances more meaningful. Days turned into weeks, and autumn painted the surrounding landscape in brilliant colors. One crisp October morning, Xavier announced he needed to ride into town for supplies and asked if Mabel would like to accompany him. She readily agreed, eager for a chance to visit the general store and perhaps purchase fabric for new curtains. The journey to town was pleasant, filled with easy conversation and shared laughter. As they approached Granite, however, Xavier grew uncharacteristically quiet. "Is something troubling you?" Mabel asked, concerned by his sudden change in demeanor. Xavier guided the wagon around a bend in the road before responding. "There's something I need to tell you, Mabel, something about my past." Mabel felt a flutter of apprehension. "Whatever it is, you can tell me." "Before I came to Colorado, I rode with a rough crowd in Texas," he began, his voice low. "Nothing outlaw, but close enough that I'm not proud of it. Made enemies I shouldn't have." He paused. "Williams knowing about you worries me. If my past catches up to me, I don't want you caught in the crossfire." Mabel laid her hand gently on his arm. "We all have things in our past we regret, Xavier. What matters is who you are now." He covered her hand with his own, his touch sending warmth through her. "Thank you for that." Still, I want you to be careful in town. Stay where I can see you." Their arrival in Granite coincided with a bustling market day. The main street teemed with wagons and townspeople going about their business. Xavier secured their wagon outside the general store, helping Mabel down with strong, gentle hands that lingered perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "I need to speak with the blacksmith about some repairs," Xavier explained. "Will you be all right in the store for a spell?" Mabel assured him she would, and they agreed to meet back at the wagon in an hour. The general store offered a welcome diversion, its shelves stocked with goods from back east that reminded her of more comfortable times. She was selecting spools of thread when a familiar voice made her freeze. "Well, if it isn't the runaway bride." Mabel turned slowly to face Sarah Thornton, once her closest friend and now married to a wealthy banker's son. Sarah had always possessed a cruel streak beneath her beautiful exterior. "Hello, Sarah," Mabel replied evenly. "I hope you're well." "Better than you, obviously," Sarah said with mock sympathy. "Living as a servant to that cowboy, how the mighty have fallen." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Though perhaps servant isn't all you are to him, men have certain needs after all." Mabel felt her cheeks burn with indignation. "Xavier Kane is a gentleman, which is more than I can say for some people's husbands." She had heard rumors about Sarah's husband's indiscretions. Sarah's eyes narrowed dangerously. "At least my husband could afford a proper bride price." "What did yours offer? A tumble-down shack and pretty words." "He offered respect," Mabel retorted, surprising herself with her boldness. "And kindness, things no amount of money can buy." Before Sarah could respond, the store's bell jangled and Xavier entered, his tall frame filling the doorway. His eyes found Mabel immediately, concern evident in his expression as he noted her flushed face. "Everything all right here?" he asked, coming to stand beside Mabel with quiet authority. Sarah's demeanor changed instantly, her hostility masked behind a practiced smile. "Mr. Kane, how lovely to see you. I was just catching up with dear Mabel." Xavier nodded politely but placed a protective hand at the small of Mabel's back. "If you're finished with your purchases, Miss Foster, our wagon's loaded." The gentle pressure of his hand guided Mabel toward the door, but Sarah's parting words followed them. "Do give Roger my regards when next you see him. He's quite determined to resolve your situation." Outside, Xavier helped Mabel into the wagon with more force than necessary, his jaw clenched tight. They rode in silence until they were well beyond the town limits. "What did she mean about Williams resolving our situation?" he finally asked. Mabel sighed. "Roger apparently believes I still belong to him. Sarah was just being spiteful." Xavier's hands tightened on the reins. "You don't belong to anyone, Mabel, least of all that snake." His vehemence surprised her. "Xavier, what's really bothering you?" He was quiet for so long that Mabel thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I've come to care for you, Mabel, more than I should given our arrangement. The thought of Williams or anyone thinking they have a claim on you." He trailed off. Mabel's heart quickened. "I care for you too," she admitted softly. Xavier pulled the wagon to a halt at the crest of a hill overlooking a valley ablaze with autumn colors. He turned to face her fully. "I need you to know something. I'm not a wealthy man. I can't offer you the life you deserved, the one your father would have wanted for you." "My father would have wanted me to be happy," Mabel interrupted. "Money didn't make him happy, his work did. The people he helped." Xavier reached for her hand, his calloused fingers engulfing her smaller ones. "I wake up every morning thinking about your smile. Go to sleep at night remembering the sound of your laugh. I never expected to feel this way again after losing my family. But you've brought something back to me I thought was gone forever." Mabel felt tears gather in her eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "I feel the same," she whispered. "When Roger left me, I thought my life was over. Now I realize it was just beginning." Their first kiss was tentative, gentle, a promise exchanged without words beneath the vast Colorado sky. When they finally continued homeward, something had fundamentally changed between them. No longer employer and employee, but a man and woman building something precious together. That evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Xavier surprised Mabel by retrieving a small wooden box from a hiding place beneath a floorboard. "This belonged to my mother," he explained, opening the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small pearl. It's not fancy, but it was her most treasured possession. Mabel's breath caught as Xavier knelt before her. I know this is sudden, and I'll understand if you need time, but I love you, Mabel Foster. I don't care that you have no dowry. You're the only treasure I need to start our life together. Tears spilled freely down Mabel's cheeks. Yes, she breathed. Yes, I'll marry you, Xavier Kane. The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. That night, they planned a simple wedding to take place in 2 weeks' time, with only the local pastor and a few townspeople Xavier counted as friends to witness their vows. The morning after their engagement, Mabel awoke to the sound of horses approaching. She looked out the window to see Sheriff Donnelly riding toward the cabin, his expression grim. Xavier met him outside, and Mabel dressed quickly to join them, sensing trouble. Williams has filed a claim against Miss Foster, the sheriff explained once Mabel arrived. Says she took valuable property belonging to him when she left town. That's absurd, Mabel protested. I left with nothing but the clothes on my back. Sheriff Donnelly looked uncomfortable. He's claiming you took jewelry that was a deposit on the marriage contract. Says without returning it, the engagement can't be properly dissolved. Xavier's expression darkened. This is harassment, plain and simple. I know, the sheriff agreed, but Judge Parker's nephew is married to William's sister. The judge has ordered a hearing for next week. After the sheriff departed, Xavier paced the cabin like a caged wolf. This is William's way of forcing you back to town, where he thinks he has the advantage. What choice do I have? Mabel asked. If I don't appear, they could send men to bring me in. Xavier stopped pacing, his decision made. We get married now, today, not in 2 weeks. What? How would that help? As your husband, I'd have legal standing to represent you, and Williams would have no claim on a married woman. Mabel considered this. But what about our plans, the ceremony? We can have a proper celebration later, Xavier said, taking her hands. Right now, we need to protect ourselves legally. Pastor Stevens can marry us today, and we'll file the certificate immediately. Though not the wedding day she had imagined, Mabel agreed. Within hours, they were standing before Pastor Stevens in his small study, exchanging vows with the sheriff and the pastor's wife as witnesses. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, Xavier's voice steady as he promised to love and protect Mabel for all his days. As they rode back to the ranch, now truly their home, Mabel felt a mixture of emotions. Joy at being Xavier's wife, anxiety about the confrontation to come, and determination to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. The hearing was scheduled for Monday morning. Xavier and Mabel arrived at the courthouse to find a small crowd gathered, news of the dispute having spread through town. Williams sat at the plaintiff's table looking smug, flanked by 2 attorneys from Denver. Judge Parker entered, his relationship to Williams' family evident in his barely concealed bias as the proceedings began. Williams presented his case first, spinning a tale of Mabel stealing family heirlooms and breaking a formal engagement contract. When Xavier attempted to interject, the judge sharply silenced him. When it was Mabel's turn to speak, she rose with quiet dignity. Your Honor, I entered into an engagement with Mr. Williams in good faith. He abandoned me on our wedding day, leaving me destitute. I took nothing that wasn't mine. She presented the marriage certificate. I am now Mrs. Kane, and I respectfully ask that these false claims be dismissed. Williams leaped to his feet. The marriage is invalid. She was still contracted to me, Judge Parker frowned, examining the certificate. The marriage appears legal, performed by a licensed minister with proper witnesses. Williams conferred urgently with his lawyers, who seemed to be advising restraint. He ignored them, his face flushing with anger. She had no right to marry. I had already paid her father for her. A murmur ran through the courtroom at this crude statement. The judge, aware of the watching townspeople, cleared his throat. Mr. Williams, no woman can be paid for in Colorado territory if you had a financial arrangement with the late doctor. Foster, that's a separate matter from Miss Foster, pardon me, Mrs. Kane's freedom to marry. The case began to unravel as Williams's true motivations became apparent. It emerged that Dr. Foster had owned a small parcel of land adjacent to a silver mining claim that Williams had quietly purchased. The land was thought worthless until a recent geological survey suggested the silver vein extended onto the Foster property. Williams had courted Mabel to gain control of the land through marriage, then abandoned the plan when a seemingly better opportunity arose, only to discover his mistake later. "So this was never about jewelry," Xavier stated, his contempt evident. "It was about trying to control land that rightfully belongs to Mabel." The judge, now keenly aware of the public scrutiny, ruled that Williams had no valid claim on either Mabel or the property. The court recognizes the legitimate marriage of Xavier and Mabel Kane. Mrs. Kane retains all rights to her inheritance. Case dismissed. As they left the courthouse, Mabel felt as though a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Xavier pulled her close, whispering, "Let's go home, Mrs. Kane." Their victory was sweet but short-lived. 2 days later, Xavier returned from checking fence lines with troubling news. Someone had tampered with their well, and 3 head of cattle were missing. "Williams?" Mabel asked, though she already knew the answer. Xavier nodded grimly. "This won't end until he gets what he wants or until I convince him the price is too high." That night, Xavier loaded his rifle and revolver. "I'm riding to the Diamond W tomorrow," he told Mabel, referring to Williams' ranch. "This ends now, one way or another." "You can't go alone," Mabel protested. "He'll have men waiting." "Which is why I'm not walking into a trap," Xavier assured her. "I've sent word to some friends, good men I trust. They'll meet me at dawn." Despite his reassurances, Mabel barely slept. When Xavier kissed her goodbye in the pale morning light, she clung to him with desperate strength. "Come back to me," she whispered. "Always," he promised. The day stretched endlessly as Mabel waited, jumping at every sound. By dusk, her nerves were frayed to breaking. When hoofbeats finally approached, she ran outside, heart in her throat. Xavier rode slowly into the yard, his shirt bloodied but his smile triumphant. Behind him rode 3 men, leading packhorses laden with supplies. "It's over," he announced as Mabel rushed to help him dismount, alarmed by the blood. "Just a graze," he assured her, showing a minor wound on his upper arm. That evening, as Xavier's friends camped in the yard, he explained what had happened. They had confronted Williams at his ranch, demanding an end to the harassment. Williams had responded with violence, ordering his men to open fire. In the ensuing gunfight, Williams was wounded not fatally, but seriously enough to be taken to Denver for medical treatment. "His foreman surrendered after that," Xavier explained. "Turns out most of his men were just hired guns with no loyalty. We found our missing cattle and something else." He handed Mabel a leather portfolio. Inside were deeds and documents belonging to her father, including the mining survey showing the value of their land and proof that Williams had forged documents attempting to claim it. "With these, we can file a formal complaint against Williams for fraud," Xavier said. "The territorial marshal has already been notified. Williams won't be bothering us again or anyone else. He's facing prison when he recovers." Relief washed over Mabel, followed by a surge of love for this man who had risked everything to protect her and what was rightfully hers. "So we're safe now." "Truly safe, we are," Xavier confirmed, drawing her into his arms. "And something else, that land of your father's. The silver vein is real. It's not a fortune, but it's enough to expand our ranch, build a proper home." He hesitated. "If that's what you want." Mabel smiled up at him. "The only thing I want is a life with you. Everything else is just details." That night, they truly began their life together, no longer shadowed by threats or the past. Xavier's friends departed the next day, but not before helping to repair the damage Williams and his men had caused to the ranch. Over the following year, Xavier and Mabel worked side by side to build their dream. The silver claim provided enough capital to purchase adjoining land, expanding the ranch and their cattle herd. They hired 2 reliable hands to help with the increasing workload, and Xavier began breeding horses, something he'd always wanted to do but lacked the resources for previously. Mabel discovered she had her father's head for business and managed the ranch accounts with skill that impressed even the bank manager who had once looked down on her. With her guidance, they invested wisely, ensuring their future security. In the spring of 1877, they broke ground on a new house larger than the cabin but still modest, designed for comfort rather than show. By summer, it was completed with 4 bedrooms for the future, as Xavier said with a meaningful look that made Mabel blush. That future arrived sooner than expected. By Christmas, Mabel was expecting their first child, her condition prompting Xavier to hover protectively, much to her amused exasperation. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she reminded him when he insisted on carrying her across a shallow puddle in the yard. "Humor me," he replied with a grin. "It's not every day a man gets to carry both his wife and child at once." Their son, Samuel Foster Kane, was born on a stormy night in July 1878. Xavier paced outside their bedroom as the midwife attended Mabel, his face ashen with worry until the sound of a baby's lusty cry split the air. When he was finally allowed inside, the sight of Mabel holding their son rendered him speechless with awe. "He has your eyes," Mabel whispered as Xavier carefully took the swaddled infant in his strong arms. "And your determination," Xavier replied as tiny fingers gripped his thumb with surprising strength. "He's perfect, Mabel. Thank you for this gift." The years that followed brought prosperity and happiness to the Kane ranch. Samuel grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's adventurous spirit and his mother's compassion. He was joined by a sister, Eleanor, in 1880, and another brother, James, in 1883. The ranch flourished, becoming known throughout the territory for its fine horses and quality cattle. Xavier's breeding program produced mounts sought after by the cavalry and wealthy ranchers alike, while Mabel's careful management ensured their continued financial security. They built a small schoolhouse on their property, hiring a teacher not just for their children, but for those of their workers and neighboring homesteaders as well. As Granite grew from a mining camp into a proper town, Xavier and Mabel became respected community leaders. Xavier served on the town council, while Mabel, drawing on her father's legacy, established a small infirmary that served those who couldn't afford the doctor's fees. In the summer of 1885, they celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together friends and neighbors from miles around. As twilight fell and lanterns were lit in the yard, Xavier led Mabel away from the festivities to the hilltop where they had shared their first kiss. 10 years, he marveled, his arm around her waist. "Sometimes I still can't believe you chose me." Mabel leaned into his embrace. At 30, she was more beautiful to him than ever, motherhood and confidence having added depth to the girl he'd fallen in love with. "I think we chose each other," she corrected gently, "and it's the best choice I ever made." Xavier reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I have something for you." Inside lay a delicate gold necklace with 3 small birthstones, one for each of their children. "It's beautiful," Mabel breathed as Xavier fastened it around her neck. "Not half as beautiful as you," he replied, his voice husky with emotion. "When I saw you standing alone that day at the stagecoach station, I had no idea how completely you would change my life." "You saved me," Mabel said softly, touching his cheek. Xavier shook his head. "No, my love, we saved each other." They returned to the celebration hand in hand, their children running to greet them with excited chatter about the cake and dancing. As Xavier swung little Eleanor up onto his shoulders and Samuel raced ahead with James toddling determinedly after him, Mabel felt her heart swell with gratitude for this life they had built together. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the children were asleep, Xavier and Mabel stood on the porch of their home, gazing at the stars scattered like diamonds across the Colorado sky. "Any regrets?" Xavier asked softly, his arms encircling her from behind. Mabel turned in his embrace to face him, the man whose love had transformed her life. "Not one," she answered truthfully. "Every hardship led me here, to you, to our children, to this life. How could I regret any of it?" Xavier's kiss was as tender as it was passionate, carrying all the love and promise of their years together and those yet to come. "You truly are the only treasure I ever needed," he whispered against her lips. "And you are mine," Mabel replied, her heart full to bursting with love for this cowboy who had seen value in her when she had nothing to offer but herself. As autumn approached, bringing with it the 10th anniversary of their meeting, Xavier surprised Mabel with news that he had purchased the old Foster property in town. "I thought we might restore it," he explained as they walked through the neglected rooms where Mabel had grown up. "Not to live in, but as a place for travelers who need shelter, a way to honor your father's legacy of helping others." Touched beyond words, Mabel embraced her husband tightly. "He would have loved that, and he would have loved you." "I hope so," Xavier said sincerely. "I've tried to be worthy of his daughter." The renovation of the Foster house, as it came to be known, became a community project. Neighbors and friends contributed labor and materials, transforming the dilapidated structure into a welcoming haven. By Christmas, it was ready to receive its first guests, a young couple with a newborn baby traveling west to meet family, caught in a winter storm. Watching the grateful family settle into the warm parlor, Mabel was struck by how life had come full circle. 10 years ago, she had been alone and desperate. Now she stood beside her husband, surrounded by their children, with the means and heart to help others in need. "What are you thinking?" Xavier asked, noting her thoughtful expression. "That every ending can be a beginning," she replied, squeezing his hand. "If we're brave enough to take the chance." As their family grew and the years passed, that philosophy guided the Kanes through both joys and sorrows. They weathered droughts and blizzards, economic downturns and personal losses. When fire destroyed part of the ranch in 1888, they rebuilt. When illness claimed little James for a frightening week in 1890, they nursed him back to health with unwavering devotion. Through it all, their love remained the bedrock of their existence, deepening with each challenge overcome, each happiness shared. The children grew, Samuel showing his father's skill with horses, Alina revealing a talent for healing that reminded Mabel of her father, and James developing a quick mind for numbers and business. In the spring of 1895, almost 20 years after that fateful day at the stagecoach station, Xavier and Mabel stood arm in arm watching Samuel ride out with a cattle drive for the first time, no longer a boy, but a young man of 17, tall and confident in the saddle. "He reminds me of you," Mabel said, leaning her head against Xavier's shoulder. "Poor kid," Xavier joked, though pride shone in his eyes. "Let's hope he finds a woman half as wonderful as his mother." "When the time is right," Mabel agreed. "There's no rush." That evening, after the younger children were in bed, Xavier found Mabel in their bedroom, brushing her hair before the mirror. Gray threaded the copper now, matching the silver in his own dark hair, but to him, she was as beautiful as the day they met. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if your fiancé hadn't left you at the altar?" he asked, meeting her eyes in the mirror's reflection. Mabel set down her brush and turned to him. "No," she answered truthfully. "Because then I would never have met you, and that's a world I can't imagine." Xavier took her hands in his, thumbs caressing the wedding band he'd placed there 2 decades ago. "You know, when I told Williams you were the only treasure I needed, I meant it with all my heart, but I had no idea then how rich we would become." "Not in money," Mabel said softly. "No," Xavier agreed, "in everything that truly matters, in love and family, in work that means something, in a life built together." He kissed her gently. "You came to me with no dowry, Mabel Foster, but you've given me more wealth than any man deserves." Outside their window, the stars shone over the ranch they had built together, the land they had nurtured, the home they had created, the family they had raised. From humble beginnings had grown a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone, passed down through children and grandchildren yet to come. In the quiet of their room, Xavier and Mabel held each other close, grateful for the chance encounter that had brought them together and the courage they had found in each other to build a life neither could have imagined alone. No gold or silver could compare to the treasure they had discovered in each other's hearts, a love that had transformed them both, making them more together than they could ever have been apart. As they drifted to sleep in each other's arms, Mabel's last thought was one of perfect contentment. From the moment Xavier Kane had told her she was the only treasure he needed to start their life together, every day had proven the truth of those words. Their love was the greatest wealth of all, a fortune that could never be spent, only shared and multiplied through the years of their life together. And in that sharing, in that steadfast devotion through good times and bad, they had found the true meaning of treasure. Not in what they possessed, but in what they had become together, two hearts united as one, stronger for having found each other, richer for having loved without reservation, and blessed beyond measure by the life they had created out of nothing but hope and courage and unwavering love. In the quiet Colorado night, beneath the vast canopy of stars that had witnessed their journey from strangers to beloved partners, Xavier and Mabel Kane slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they had found in each other the greatest treasure of all, a love that would endure for all their days and beyond, into the legacy they would leave behind in the ranch, in their children, and in the community they had helped to build from the wilderness of the West.